The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off. Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show, joined today by Derrick, Lynch of Clare FM and Kevin O'Brien from the 42. Men, how are you doing?
Good, Shane. How's things?
Not too bad at all, and Kev? Good regard. We'll start off with yourself. So, Derrick, just news has come through there last night that Brian Lohan has been ratified for another 3 years in charge of Clare. I think most people would agree that he took on a team that I think maybe you weren't projecting too many successful seasons in the short term. He's done really, really well. So there must have been a huge clamour for him to stay.
There was, yeah. I think it's one word that has been mentioned in Clare an awful lot under Brian Lohan's tenure has been unity. That, you know, he was obviously this iconic figure within the county and hurling and GAA circles in general. So he was already popular. He was already someone that people got behind, and that transferred over into his managerial tenure then as well. But I suppose when he was ratified initially on, I think it was Halloween night of 2019, little could any of us have predicted the 2 years that would follow. You know, that's one thing I think people probably have to remember when you're assessing where Clare are at and where Brian Lohan as a manager is at, in that he has been the manager for these two COVID championships. So we're yet to see what he and the players can do in what we'll call a regular season. So that's something that people are very much aware of. But immediately following that Cork defeat, Shane, down in Limerick, people were saying, well, listen, Brian was put in for 2 years with a third year under review. Now, what more review do you want? We were in a puck of a ball of beating Cork, who got to an All-Ireland final. So it was inevitable in a lot of ways. I think it was probably a bit longer than some people expected to get it all wrapped up, but thankfully it has been wrapped up and Brian's there for 3 years, and I think that gives a bit of certainty, you know, that we know now what the road will be ahead, hopefully.
Why was there such a delay? You would have thought to try and get this wrapped up straight away, but there was some sort of a review, I believe, was there? Yeah,
that was part of the initial appointment process, that there would be a review. But as I mentioned, like, you know, what more review do you need? We saw the progress that the team made under Brian. You know, very unlucky not to beat Cork. We all thought when Tony Kelly is bearing down on goal in injury time that it's a fait accompli. So who knows what would have happened after that. But yeah, it probably just, there was a little bit of delay from County Board. The chairman was asked at the meeting last Tuesday night as to why there was a delay. He said he felt there wasn't, that he had contacted Brian after the week after the game. I just took that little bit, a couple of weeks, I suppose, to get things in train. But really, it was more, I think people saw it as if the board had moved quickly to back Brian and put that confidence in him. Like, there's no rush till the National League starts in February or whenever it'll be. So look, it's done now, I think, and people are happy to move on and get behind Brian again.
Yeah, Kevin, you're an Offaly man on the outside looking in. It probably seemed obvious enough to you too that Brian Lohan had to be the man to stay in.
Yeah, I think it was the decision everyone expected, really. Like, you can see the progress, I suppose, Clare have made over the last few years under Lohan. And as Derrick mentioned there, like, it hasn't been easy for him. There's been loads of off the field stuff that he's had to deal with. You know, issues with County Board and stuff as well. And I think, like, you look at Clare, the big issue is probably the lack of underage players coming through. But what he's had to work with, Brian Lohan, I think he's done exceptionally well. And like, the big thing, I suppose, if they can get back Peter Duggan back into the team next season, by all accounts, he's going well in the championship, and someone like Shane O'Donnell as well, who missed a good chunk of the year with concussion. Like, you factor those two guys back into it, and Clare definitely have a better look to them going ahead next season.
Yeah, absolutely. We've loads coming on the show here. We're going to talk about Micheál Donoghue stepping out of the Galway race. Is Davey Fitz going to be the man to step in there? We'll be previewing Clare, Waterford, Kilkenny, Dublin hurling championships. We want to talk about the returns of school competitions, because obviously a lot of people in school last year missed out on a full year of competitions, but we're seeing some of the fixtures start again. The draw for the Hearties out, Kearney, Buiri, and of course all the other ones across the board. Who's the greatest GAA player to wear number one? John Kiely staying on for another 2 years as well. Shall we? I just wanted to ask you, actually, Derrick, as well. Where do you think Clare lie in the pecking order ahead of next year? If, like, you know, Kevin is talking about, Shane O'Donnell, he had a concussion issue earlier this year, more or less missed the key matches in the championship. Peter Duggan is back scoring points for Clooney Quinn. Like, are you looking at next year thinking this is going to be a bear pit, trying to be one of the top 3 to get out of Munster? And I mean, a lot of people will be saying Clare may not get out of that, but how are you feeling about that?
I think everybody can agree, Shane, that at the minute you have a pecking order of Limerick number 1, and way back down the road in there's a pack chasing. It's like the Tour de France when the peloton goes clear in the hills. Like, it's difficult to know what order that pack are in. You know, do you go on last year's All-Ireland final form and put Cork number 2? That performance probably tells you that you shouldn't. You're going to touch on it later. I know Galway, the great enigma. If they were to get Davey in there, we know that the season 1 and 2 bounce that he often brings to teams as well. So, from a Munster perspective, obviously Limerick way out ahead. But I don't think there's a whole lot separating the other teams, and we've seen that in league and championship results in recent years. You know, even from a Tipperary perspective, we know it's a rebuilding job in the post. The post Liam era as well, you know, so there's a lot of questions to be answered. I think Clare might have just a little half step up in the sense that there's going to be change in Waterford, there's going to be change in Tip, we know all that. But from a Clare point of view, we're now going to be in year 3 of Brian Lohan and what he's working with. So when you're looking for small margins, maybe that little bit of stability might be something that Clare can cling to. But if we get back to that round robin Munster Championship next year, like what a thing that's going to be to look forward to, and there'll be so many questions to answer.
Kevin, if you were to pick 2 teams not to come out of Munster next year, who do you think they'd be?
That is a tricky one. That's a very tough one. I'm not really sure. I might choose. Yeah, it's hard because look, if you're looking at say the top 3, like right, you're guaranteed Limerick is going to be there, and then considering the season Cork had last year and Waterford, who've been contending for All Ireland the last couple of years, you kind of have to go with that top 3. But then you're leaving out Clare and Tip, like, so it's not exactly it's not an easy one to call, really. And you'll often find, like, you come into the season and you kind of think, right, these are clearly the best 3 teams in the province. But the way things can go, particularly in that round robin, like we've seen, you know, the 2 years that we had it there was so many sort of surprise results, and things hinged on, you know, a bounce of a ball here and a goal here and there. So I think it's a hard one to call. Like, I could say Clare and Tip there, but like they could easily be the top 2, well, 2 of the top 3 next year as well.
Yeah, I'm going to put my neck on the block here, Derrick, and we've history here now talking about the likes of Clare and Tipperary, but I'm going to say the 2 teams to not get through Munster next year are going to be Clare and Cork.
Right, I'm going to save this show later, and when I'm talking to you, Shane, about a Munster final preview next year, I'll play it back to you maybe.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's important to put the neck on the block, whether you're right or wrong, just to have some sort of to go for it either way. But let's talk about the Galway situation. Micheál Donoghue stepped out. Obviously, discussions didn't go great there. We know about that in Tipperary too, what happened with Liam Cahill. But even though he would say that maybe they're playing it down a bit. But Johnny Kelly might be in line, Brian Hanley might be in line, Jeff Linsky. But the one being talked about most is a Clare man like yourself, Derrick, Davey Fitz. Could you see it happening? You know, obviously, Gerald Nan was there before, but could you see this happening?
You could easily. I mean, Davey has the Galway connections. We know that. He worked with Cyril Farrell in LIT. Joe Canning played under him in LIT. Could he coax Joe back out of retirement? It would take a major U-turn for that to happen, but, you know, stranger things have happened as well. And it was interesting that when Davey was asked about it, the one name that he seemed to name check as him not wanting to take on was Micheál Donoghue. But now that factor is gone, does that change the way that he's thinking? It's hard to know. It's obviously a much quicker hop to Salt Hill than it is to Wexford from 6 Mile Bridge, so that's going to be a factor from his point of view as well. And it's a high profile gig, and it's a team that it probably fits the Davey profile in the sense that it's a team that we know are stacked with potential, but are probably just lying dormant for the last maybe 3 or 4 years. So is it something that he would like to take on in a project? It probably is. And it could be that bounce that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago as well, that he could bring to Galway, and you could see them really, really kind of coming back to form again.
Kevin, I think you spoke with the Galway chairman, Pat Carney, last week. This was before Micheál Donoghue exited the fray. What was the sort of mood you got from him?
Yeah, so I spoke with him earlier this week, and when I was chatting to him, it was obviously a day before the news came out that Micheál Donoghue pulled from the race. And at the time when I was talking to him, he seemed fairly confident that they would have someone in place by next week. They they were in discussions with the candidates. He wouldn't give me any information on how many candidates were going for it. But just from talking to him, he seemed to be fairly certain that the process was well underway, and we weren't far away from a resolution. Now, I don't know if, in the time since then, did Micheál Donoghue pull out, or had he pulled out before then of the race? It's an interesting one, because I think there was reports at the time when Donoghue initially stepped down that there was some sort of fallout with the county board, and some people were mentioning, was it to do with finances? Were they not getting the financial backing that he would expect? And obviously, he knows what it takes to win All Ireland, and you look like a county like Limerick, who we know the funding they get, and they're such a well-resourced team. And Donoghue, I would guess, he knows that they need major backing as well. So it's kind of interesting then when you talk about someone like Davey Fitz coming into the fray, that he will obviously demand certain backing for the squad, and he will want structures put in place to allow them to compete. So, if Donoghue has pulled out over an issue with finances, it'll just be interesting to see will that same thing come with Davey Fitz. But I think Davey Fitz, he's definitely the most high-profile name in the running now. So, and the Canning question is an interesting one. Derrick mentioned there, because Davey obviously knows him really well from LIT, and I guarantee if Davey was to get the job, the first call he'd be putting in would be trying to get Joe Canning to come out of retirement. So that's certainly one to watch.
I actually wonder if, I always got the sense from talking to Joe Canning in the past few years, particularly an interview in 2019, it could be 18, but he was just talking about all the injuries he'd had, and that's more to do with his decision than anything else. So I actually wouldn't be overly sure that he would go back, but I could see a situation where he's brought in as either a coach or a selector or something like that. I wouldn't, and then that would also, a bit like when Brian Cody gets in DJ Carey, there's probably a few extra people kind of supporting your ticket then, because you're like, oh yeah, I like DJ Carey, and the whole of Galway obviously loves Joe Canning, and you can understand why. But even just to jump on to another point that I wanted to make to you, Derrick, because of the Clare contingent within Galway hurling, Saoirse Bulfin, he's over Castlegar, along with Fergal Lynch, if I have that correctly, are correct. And then also in Liam Mellows, Louis Mulqueen has been there as well. So let's say he could draw on a lot of people he knows in terms of making sure that he had every angle covered in Galway, couldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And all those three guys you mentioned have been involved with him in various management teams in the past as well. Saoirse and himself have kind of been almost inseparable since their time in LIT together as well. So that's a great insight for him to have. And he's going to know the Galway hurling scene quite well anyway, because, it being a neighbouring county, the likes of Gort, St. Thomas's, Loughrea, all these are only just a short hop up the road, so you'd often have seen them in action as well. He's the big high profile name. It's hard to see, are there any sleepers out there that could be drafted in? Anthony Daly is nearly always mentioned with various management roles as well. He's been in Galway in the club championship in the last couple of years too. So would he be a last minute addition? It's hard to tell, but I think at this stage, if the likes of him was in there, we'd have probably heard about it by now. So I think the ball is somewhat in Davy's court. I'd say he's interested. And again, just the fact that Micheál is gone, I think he was eager, from what we were hearing, not to take him on, because at the end of the day, they're fairly tribal up there, no more than we are in Clare or in Tip as well. So would there be more backing for one of their own, and particularly someone like Micheál? Would it have been folly to take him on? It probably would have. But now that he's out of the race and his name has been mentioned an awful lot more again in media circles in the last couple of days, I think that's a factor to take note of as well.
Kevin, do you think I'm going to come to Larry O'Gorman's quotes, which were very interesting on Davey Fitz if he took over Galway after being in charge of Wexford. But first off, do you think it's a good or a bad time to take over Galway? And obviously, we've already talked about Joe Canning having just stepped away. But do you think this is a team that's potentially on the rise or on the fall?
It's a tricky one. I think when you're taking over a team, generally they've sort of underachieved the year before you've come in, and that's why there's a vacancy there. The thing with Galway is, you go back a season before last, and they ran Limerick so close in that All-Ireland semi-final. People sort of forget how close they actually were, and I think maybe they were level 5 minutes into the second half stoppage time or something like that, and Limerick eventually pulled it out. So this is a team that were knocking on the door up the last season. I sort of felt with them this year that maybe they peaked a bit too early. I thought during the league they were absolutely flying it, and they had some great results in the league, and they were putting up huge scores. And by the time the championship came around, they sort of looked flat. I was at the game against Dublin, and they were just a mile off the pace. So I think it could have been an issue there of timing the run. Galway still have unbelievable potential, and if you're talking about Davey Fitz coming into the team, one thing he guarantees when he takes over side is they'll be supremely fit and they'll be hopping off the ground, certainly in his first couple of seasons. when he takes over a team, you can see the difference he makes. So if you imagine a Galway team there who are just, you know, have that Davey Fitz strength and conditioning put into them over the previous pre-season and league campaign, like I think they're a serious contender. Even with Joe Canning going, they have unbelievable players, the forwards that they have, the likes of Conor Whelan, who's still doing the business up front. Like, there's so many players in Galway, and there's such a strong squad there that they've had all the underage success as well. It's about putting that all together, and maybe a county like Galway, sometimes they kind of need an outside man to come in and sort of bring the whole thing together. So like I think Galway are still right up there, and if you remember the championship last year, like they were everybody's favourites really after Limerick. They were the team everybody thought would push them closest. So you can sort of read too much into a season. I think they will look at 2021 as just a disaster in the championship, and there's so much improvement they can make next season. So like I wouldn't be surprised if they were back in All-Ireland final next year.
Yeah, if you like, who else has forwards in their prime like Conor Whelan, Cathal Mannion, Brian Kincannon, Evan Nyland? A lot of people would have seen him starting last year, and then it's obviously you need to get a little bit more out of other players, add one or two to the defence and midfield. Actually, to be honest, now I'm making it sound like maybe there are a lot of holes to plug, but I do think there's potential there. The comments then from Larry O'Gorman, I'm going to read them out, Derrick, and maybe you might let me know your thoughts on it. So he's talking about Davey Fitz potentially taking over Galway after 5 years with Wexford. He said he wants to take a year or two out, but who knows if there's an opportunity for Davey somewhere else. To say 1 week Davey loves Wexford and the following week then he loves Galway or Dublin, so it's very hard to take. When you're fully committed to a county, I think you should stick with that county and then take a break for a couple of years. It's really down to himself. Your loyalty and love for a county only sticks with you when you're with that county, apparently. I think when you move on, you want to give it a rest for a wee while. Maybe go for some other challenge, maybe take over a football county somewhere just to give himself a break for hurling. How can you train a team for a number of years and then jump ship to train another team to beat you after being so loyal to them? Is Larry O'Gorman being overly sensitive, or does he have a fair point there, Derrick?
I think, like most things, Shane, it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think the prospect of Davey Fitz taking over a football team is one that probably jumps out in that particular statement. Anyway, it's the merry-go-round of managers. We've seen it. This isn't a new phenomenon, so I don't think that Larry probably is being a little bit sensitive that. Should Davey always want to lose to Wexford just because he was there? Should he not try to beat Waterford because he got a Munster title down there with them? Your loyalties are where you are at that particular time, and you have to commit to everything. And like you only have to look at Davey's last couple of years where he was wearing the Wexford top down the sideline from his former teammate Brian Lohan up against his own native county. So it's at high level sport, particularly in the amateur game of GAA, it's going to happen if you're moving around. If you're not over your own county but you want to be developing your coaching career, you're going to be somewhere else. So loyalties last for as long as they last, and then you move on to the next challenge, I think.
Yeah, that's the cold-hearted way to look at it. ML89 says, Galway's unique. It'd be Davey's biggest job to date with due respect to Wexford, Waterford and Clare. They're like a big three county with small county success. What do you make of that, Kevin? That's fairly cutting to the quick there from ML89.
Yeah, but he's kind of like, he's right. If you look at the standard of players available to Galway compared to the other sides, like Davey Fitz, he's often been criticised about his style of play and playing an extra defender, but you look at the forwards that you have on offer there in Galway. If you were to take them over, like it would be hard to sort of justify him leaving out an extra forward there to play an extra defender. But just going back to the Larry O'Gorman comments, like I can kind of see where he's coming from, because we know what Davey's like when he's giving interviews, and you can see the passion he has, and he talks about how much love he has and the bond he has with the players. But I think he's probably a bit different. Like he sort of reminds me of Jose Mourinho a bit. You just can't keep him away from it. He leaves one job and the consensus is he should probably take a break now and come back after a year or two, but he just throws himself into the next one. And but this is a guy who's been 35 years, I think it is, consecutively in senior county between playing and managing. So he's just wired differently, and he loves managing at the top. And I know he's coaching with 6 Mile Bridge, but I don't think that would be enough to whet his appetite. Like I really do think that he wants to stay involved in inter-county, and the reason he probably didn't really put his name out there for this job was because he sort of thought Micheál Donoghue was going to go for it, and he kind of respected that because he's a former All-Ireland winning manager. But now I think there's no reason why he shouldn't really go for this job, and probably why they shouldn't give it to him, because the experience he has. And I think if you're looking for a bounce over a year or two, then certainly Davey Fitz is the man who can provide that.
Yeah. Comment in here from Paul Young. Galway supporters won't like playing with an extra man in the back line. Galway should be right up there every year, winning All-Irelands. Larry disappointed that Davey should have won an All-Ireland with Wexford. They probably are disappointed with 2019, 5 points up on tip and a man up. They were in a right little spot. As it happened, Galway played with a sweeper last year under Shane O'Neill in the 2020 championship, and I couldn't understand it at all. I thought that was kind of... especially against Kilkenny in the Leinster Championship, I thought, like, there's no reason you couldn't go toe-to-toe here with the quality of players. But another comment in from Sherp to U1. Davey is a bit too emotional for my style and taste, but it's down to the panel and whether or not they buy into his methods or madness. But also the way he sets up the team. And at times last year, we looked at Wexford and there was no forward inside the 45. Would that be the case with Galway, where a lot of days you're going to have better players 1 to 15 than the opposition? Would he set up differently? I'd be interested to see that. But as 6 Mile Bridge has been mentioned there, and the Clare Senior Hurling Championship back in action this weekend. So there's 17 teams in the competition, Derrick, because there was no relegation last year. An extra team ended up going into it. How's 6 Mile Bridge been looking? And then could you sort of maybe tease out what the key games are this weekend?
Yeah, so 6 Mile Bridge are through to the quarter-final. The draw was made last night. They're going to be meeting Airog, so that's going to be an absolutely cracking tie. They've recent history in the championship. These two teams last year meeting in the semi-finals, if I'm not mistaken. So they're going to know each other very, very well, obviously. 6 Mile Bridge came through a group unbeaten with Clarecastle, Wolf Tones and Scariff. And many people would have seen it as... maybe weak is the wrong word, but a group that they would have managed quite easily. But came through a real battle the last day against Scariff, who were last year's intermediate champions. So they had nothing to lose. They threw the proverbial kitchen sink. And in fairness to the Bridge, as they've been doing, and as you know, it's very, very typical of what Davey brings to it. They just managed it out, kept doing what they were doing, stuck with a process that they've now developed. They're into their third year of himself and Tim Crow being that manager-coach combo, and they're looking really, really good at the moment. As for the contenders stacking up behind them, we'll know an awful lot more this weekend when the last round of group games are played. Aina Kilnamona have top Group 1, which was a 5-team group. Then this weekend we have Kilmaley against Clonlara, which is a second versus third, so essentially a playoff, although albeit a draw will do for Kilmaley to come through in that particular group. But just news this morning that a huge blow for Clonlara in that John Conlon is ruled out with a knee injury. Now, thankfully, I spoke to a few people down around Clonlara and they tell me that the knee, there was fears it was the cruciate, and obviously from an overall Clare perspective, that's the last thing we wanted to hear. It's not. We're told it's just ligament or some kind of damage to the muscles or something. I'm not a doctor, but something around that, not the cruciate anyway. So he's going to be okay, hopefully, in a couple of weeks' time, but he's out for Clonlara this weekend, and that could be a massive, massive thing for them. They had to really dig deep the last day to claw out a victory against Whitegate. It was proper daylight robbery, really, 2 goals in the last minute of injury time to win that game. So without John, how will they battle this weekend? It's going to be a massive question for them. Kilmaley, Dark Horses, that tag has been with them now for a couple of years. They've won minors in 21, so they've got big questions to answer. Then the other group that will be finished out this weekend, a real mouth-watering tie in store between Ballyea and Cratloe. So the likes of Tony Kelly and Gary Brennan going up against Podge Collins and Conor McGrath. So there's plenty household names. That's a 1 versus 2 to finish up that group. And then Broadford and Crusheen in the relegation, which is another big one as well. Crusheen recent enough champions. So lots to sort out, Shane, but it's heating up. It's always a very competitive championship, albeit that the Bridge have won the last 2 titles and have been pretty dominant. But, you know, we've had the Ballyea stories. We've had Cratloe winning the double a couple of years ago as well. So plenty of storylines to always come out of Clare.
Are there any players really standing out that Brian Lohan would be interested in? Like I hear with the likes of Scariff, Mark Rogers is obviously ripping it up. Patrick Crotty seems like a good young player. There was someone else I was going to mention there as well. Oh yeah, Conor McGrath. Is there ever potential for him to return to the inter-county fray? I know he's had a lot of problems with hip injuries.
Yeah, I don't think so at this point. I think the injuries are the major factor for Conor, and he's shoving on as well. You know, he's hitting towards the mid-30s now, so is a comeback to the high intensity of inter-county training on the cards at this stage? Probably hard to see it. From an underage point of view, then, like it's very, you know, we've seen the under-20s, particularly and a few of the guys that were involved in the Harty Cup with Flannans in the last couple of years as well. There's an Adam Hogan in Fecal, I think, who's going to be a guy that will probably come on Brian's radar, a real kind of teak, tough defender, almost in the Rory Hayes mould. So he's someone that he'd have been looking at as well. And, Shane McGrath from Fecal is always someone that people around Clare wonder why he isn't committing to the inter-county scene. He's a guy that will play midfield and finish up with double digits every day in terms of his scoring hauls. So he's someone that could be looked at as well. And it's just good that Brian and his team are there now to be watching in on the latter stages as well. But I think, to be honest, Shane, the big consensus around Clare is that the guys that are on the current panel are probably the pick of the crop at the minute, other than the cup, the 2 or 3 you'll get now through from the minor and 20 setups.
So we're going to see the return of schools competitions. Well, some of them have returned this week, and a lot of young lads and girls and stuff like that have missed out on a lot of I think important developmental football and hurling. And I was looking at a quote from John Rouse, who's the manager of St. Joseph's Secondary School of Rochford Bridge, when they played this week, and he goes, last year was awful, it really was. Lads like to get that jersey and to represent their school, and they can always then say, where did you play on the school team? It just made schools less of a fun place to be at times, because lads like to get out to all sports. Being stuck indoors all the time doing purely academic work, that's not how it's meant to be. The life of a school is so much more than the academics. Like, it really was a big blow, Kevin, for an awful lot of kids last year.
Yeah, it was, and I just loved that the last line that boys were out there, that the life of school is about so much more than academics. Like, it's really true. That age group have missed out on a huge amount, and even outside of sport, just in terms of social life and finishing school, and even the age group slightly above them who are going to college now and would have missed out on a huge amount of the normal things that kids that age go through. Like, I know I play club football with a lot of guys who are under 20, and things like your debs and last year's competitions, obviously, which couldn't get finished, which have all been sort of ran in this season. And I think, like, schools football and hurling as well, it's sort of like, it kind of gives you memories for a lifetime, really. You're involved with these squads, and a lot of these guys mightn't even continue playing football after they finish school, but it's such a great experience. You're playing with guys from different clubs, and as John Rouse says there, like, it's there's a lot more to school than just academics. Sport is a massive part of that. So I think that age group have missed out on a huge amount, and it's great for them now to be able to get stuck back into the competitions. You probably feel sorry for the guys maybe who've been there last season who couldn't actually play in your Harty Cups or Corny Murrays, and some guys would nearly time, they would go to certain schools just with the aim of playing in these competitions, and some guys might even have repeated the leaving cert to be at a stronger age, to play at that level. So that would have been disappointing, but it's great to see it back now, and long may it continue.
Yeah, Derrick, I'll bring in your experience of it. I just want to look at a comment here first from Pádraig Gill. Schools competitions should never have been postponed. How are they any different to any other competitions? Crazy. These are players' formative years, and most only get one shot at it, maybe two. Great that they're back. So just maybe you might pick up that point, Derrick, and just give your own experience of covering it, the likes of Flannan's and so on.
Yeah, it reminds you of that quote, and maybe teachers wouldn't agree with this, but that you can repeat the leaving, but you can't repeat minor, and that maybe comes into it a little bit as well. But yeah, but even outside of what we call the high profiles, the Cornaveries and the Harty Cups and those, but even down along to the C&D competitions, like I'm based here in West Clare, and a lot of the schools around here, like Kilmehel and Spanish Point and Kilkee and those, they'd be operating at C&D level in football, but like, it's the crack you'd have going to matches and heading off down to play Kerry lads and all that. There was I think the decision to rule out amalgamations in schools football probably damaged Clare a little bit, because there was a move made a couple of years ago that the 3 schools around the area would amalgamate, play at Cornavery level, and then when those guys came to minor level for Clare, if they got there, that they weren't coming up against David Clifford for the first time, that they weren't seeing Shawnee Shea for the first time, and it wasn't as much of a shock factor then when you were looking around you after 10 minutes wondering what's this fella going to do next. So there's that side of it as well. But here in Clare, like, from a hurling point of view, St. Flannan's takes credit for developing an awful lot of the best Tipperary hurlers, so you can thank us for that there, Shane. But even in the last couple of years, then we've seen Tulla, like, in the heartland of East Clare, competing at a Harty Cup level, and even the year Flannan's won it, we had that quarter-final in Cusack Park between Flannan's and Tulla, which was a fantastic occasion. And like, the town of Ennis emptied into Cusack Park that day. Everybody that was off on their lunch, all the kids came over. It was an unbelievable occasion. So to miss out on stuff like that, you just can't kind of put a price on it.
And just before I let you go, Derrick, there's a comment in here, another one from ML89. Clare will be fine for the next 5 years or so, 5 or so years. It's what happens after that should be the fear for Clare of falling off the cliff. Hope that it's just a small bit of scaremongering and that doesn't happen. Now, I think Donald Maloney, he was speaking recently to Michael Verney, I think, about what they're looking to do in terms of developing things. You know, that 40-point loss to Cork last year in the minor was a bit of a shocker, and I'm pretty sure the under-16 competition wasn't ran within Clare the year before, so that obviously didn't help them. But what would your thoughts be on Clare's hurling future? Do you think that there is, like, how drastic is action needed here, or things not as bad as that would suggest?
No, action is needed. We can't. There's no point saying otherwise. But I think that action is starting to happen now because of the noise that has been made in the last sort of 6 to 12 months. I mean, at under 20 level, we know what Clare did at the start of the decade where they won the 3 in a row and dominated. And then since 2015, didn't win a game other than the Kerry one this year at under 20 level. So that sent up alarm bells. Same at minor level. Reached those couple of Munster finals against Cork, but were ultimately well beaten. So I think that work has started. It's fantastic to have someone like Donald Maloney so hands-on, and I think it speaks volumes of the character of the man that he did that so soon after stepping back from the senior gig as well. So he's got good people around him. I think that work is starting. This review group that we're due to hear from in a couple of weeks' time in Clare will talk about putting more structures in place to ensure that that cliff edge doesn't happen, hopefully in 5 years. But it was important that that was done now, because if you go on another couple of years, well, then the task becomes that bit steeper. But I think now we've got the people and the expertise involved to hopefully turn things around.
Okay, well, that's brilliant stuff. Derrick Lynch of Clare FM, thanks very much for joining us.
Cheers, lads. Take care.
Great to have Derrick on there. And just even to talk about your own county, we've seen so much change with Offaly in the last couple of years since Michael Duignan came in, and now you're seeing, like, John Mahon's obviously over the football. He's just brought Tomás O'Shea, and Michael Fennelly seems to be doing a really good job in the hurling side of things. And even just looking at the average Offaly GAA player, they just look far more lean, athletic. I mean, it just feels like they've jumped into the 21st century, albeit belatedly.
Yeah, I think the big issue with Offaly was going back 10, 15 years, that the underage was neglected in the county, and they always relied on school teams to produce players, and eventually then when the school teams stopped producing players, the development squads and underage setups just weren't at the level where they needed to be. And definitely in the last 5 or 6 years, they've put a huge amount of work into that. I think there's a former S&C coach Offaly had, Dave Hare, who he would have worked with. If you look at the under-20s this year, the football that won the All-Ireland, when those guys were 14, 15, they were put on these S&C programs, and you can see the difference it makes. When you look at that team now, what jumps out is their pace, their athleticism, their leanness, and their power. And it was structures like that were put in place even ahead of Michael Duigan's time. People were sort of looking at, we need to start producing players, and athletic development is such a big part of that. You look at other counties who put guys in place, who the likes of Brian Cullen, who oversee the athletic development from underage squads. And then when guys come through the senior level, then it doesn't take them 3 or 4 years to make a step up. It might only be a year or two out of under 20, and you can make that impact. So I think it's foresight like that that's really important in counties, and we're starting to see the benefits of that in Offaly. And then, like Michael Duigan, in fairness to him, he's putting guys in the right positions and bringing in the likes of John Motton, and even bringing on Tomás O'Shea on board with the footballers, like Michael Fennelly with the hurlers as well. He's putting smart guys in place and giving them the resources to do their jobs, and you're definitely seeing the benefits of that in Offaly. And it's just great because, like, for years it was just so negative around the county scene, and some guys would have almost, you hear guys going in with the county squad and people have been nearly saying to him, why are you bothering, but now you can see the difference, and guys are proud to wear the jersey, and you have underage players coming through winning All-Ireland titles. Like, it spells really good.
Yeah, Michael Verney, who I see a comment here. Have I had my Roy Keane Saipan moment with Verney? No, he's just actually off this week, so he'll be back soon. But the reason I bring him up is he often talks about, the way O'Connor Park and Tullamore is now the home of Offaly, but he loves saying that Burr is actually the home and Brennan's Park and all that. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, as a Tullamore man, I think I'll always side with O'Connor Park being the home of inter-county games in Offaly. There's been issues, I think, with the county board and O'Connor Park over the last year, and there's always been the debate of where should the county's hurlers in particular play home games. Since St Brendan's Park in Burr was redeveloped, a lot of hurling people around the county feel that they should have been playing those games in Burr, and I think when Offaly were going well in the 90s and 90s as well, that they would have played a lot of their games there. But I think the facilities, you ask any player, they love playing in O'Connor Park because the facilities there are second to none. It's one of the best grounds in Leinster. And, at the moment, like, we obviously can't really use the dressing rooms and stuff in there, but in terms of the pitch and the stand and stuff, it's top class. So it's great to have that facility as well in Tullamore. But yeah, I think it's definitely the home of Offaly GAA now.
Yeah, bit of a sandy pitch. That's the only thing I'd say from playing there. It is a great little ground, but
Yeah.
the pitch a bit sandy at times.
I think, yeah, sometimes they can't get it wrong. And like, I remember playing a match there a couple of years ago, and you bounce the ball on it and the sand would literally jump off the ground. So there was issues as well. Sometimes during the league, you'd find the grass on one side of the pitch under the stand, it could be completely mucky and you couldn't even hop the ball. And then on the far side of the pitch, it's like playing a different sport nearly. If you're playing one wing one day and then you're on the opposite side for the second half. But I think they have got it right, and COVID probably helped as well. The fact that they were able to give the ground a bit of a rest, because you know yourself at this time of year, there's so many games that are on it, and as club championships sort of ramp up, it gets a lot of foot traffic on it. But no, I think in fairness to the grounds in there, like, it is top class, and they have got it wrong maybe with too much sand over the years. But at the moment, like, I played on it there a few weeks ago, and it's like playing on the carpet, like, so you can't ask for any more than that.
Yeah, and that thing you say about one side under the stand being affected by the weather, especially in winter, Páirc Uí Chaoimh used to be horrendous for that. I remember watching some of the games and it looked like half the pitch would be defrosted on a cold day, but then it would just be frozen by the sideline underneath the stand. So I know what you're talking about there. A thing to touch on, the greatest GAA player ever to wear number 1. Now, I threw this out on Twitter the other day, and plenty of people saying, I'm going to ask you who's your favourite number 1 in either code. Stephen Cluxton's mentioned a nice bit, Paddy Cullen, Tommy Quaid, who has Tony Redden, Martin Furlong, Damien Fitzhenry. Vernie is saying Brian Mullins. I've obviously said Sean Brennan, clubmate. And Big Boiler, Chris O'Dowd, the actor who, of course, played as a minor for Roscommon. Damien Fitzhenry is mentioned in there, Gerard Cunningham. Brendan Cummins, complete GAA player, inter-county hurler and footballer. Anyone sticking out for you?
I'll probably go with my own man, Martin Furlong. 3 All-Ireland medals and first goalkeeper to win Footballer of the Year, so I think he deserves to win there. But yeah, him or Cluxton, really, like, since I've been working and writing about GAA, like, Stephen Cluxton has just been the man and transformed the game, I think, in a lot of ways. And we've obviously seen the position go to new heights over the last couple of years. But yeah, I'll go with Martin Furlong there, Stephen Cluxton in second place on a football point of view.
Yeah, geez, it's a tough one, isn't it? It really is a tough one in the hurling side of things. Like, Brendan Cummins making some iconic saves over the years. Don Logue, to be fair, very good with the puck outs. He took that onto a new level. I think Stephen Cluxton is definitely the number 1 on the other side of things. Got Damien Fitzhenry. There was just something exciting about watching him play, wasn't there?
Yeah, I was going to mention him as well. Like, just the acrobatic saves and stuff. He was just such an exciting player to watch, and I'm surprised now you didn't mention Owen Murphy as well. I know you're a big fan of Owen Murphy over the years, championing his cause, so he probably deserves a mention as well.
He does. Do you know what? I was actually going to say there's probably not too many Kilkenny candidates for this, you know, especially during their dominant era there, especially when they were pummeling teams. Because, like, PJ Ryan, he was very good in the 2009 All-Ireland final, but I can't remember too many other games where he was called on so many times. Then even before that, James McGarry, these lads probably weren't called on as much, but do you know what? I think maybe Owen Murphy has probably done enough. A lot of people in Tipperary won't be happy with me saying that, but he's up there. And I think Damien Fitzhenry not far behind. I used to love Damien Fitzhenry, except for 2007, obviously, coming up and taking the penalties. Jeez, he was some man, or even the 21-yard free. He was some man to drive him home. I'll look at a couple of the comments here. Ger and Og, written here by John Kiley, not the John Kiley. Well, it is the John Kiley, but just not the Limerick one. ML89, Damien Fitzhenry, criminally underrated, greatest hurling goalie I've seen. Owen Murphy at a similar level and could take over from him. Stephen Cluxton, non-contest for football. Ollie Walsh was the original flamboyant goalkeeper, and his cousin Noel Skehan was equally brilliant. Would have been very good also. Davey, the number 1, certainly the most pumped up. And another comment here from Padjo Clifford. It's good to see Offaly on the way back again. Joe McDonough will be very competitive next year. Actually, I interviewed Michael Fennelly. I think you did as well for the 42, but I interviewed him. You can check it out on the playlist there. He's absolutely brilliant talking about all things Offaly, Kilkenny, and just hurling in general. But what would you think for the Joe McDonough Cup next year? Do you think the pressure is on for Offaly to win that straight away? Antrim will be in there, but surely, like, patience will probably run out within Offaly. People will just want to see straight up to Leinster after what should be a very tough league against all the big teams next year.
Yeah, it's probably dangerous to sort of presume that Offaly are just going to, straight away run away with the competition. But, obviously they won't with teams like Antrim in there. I think it's important that they build on the momentum. You can see the serious momentum they had this year. They were putting up huge scores in the championship. But again, you have to take into account the level of players they were coming up against. And now is the real test coming into next season, because, this year they did basically what was expected them to do the year before that, and they obviously lost down on the penalty shootout in the Christy Ring semi-final, which was just a disaster really, and it set the county back a season, to get back up to the level where really you'd feel Joe McDonagh is the minimum they should be competing at. Oisin Kelly, who's one of the star forwards, tore his ACL a couple of weeks ago in club championship, so he's going to be a massive loss for Offaly. But I think, like, in fairness to Michael Fennelly, he's really gone with youth this season, and there's a lot of quality players that he's brought in and given a first taste of intercounty action, and they're very young still. They're going to need maybe a season or two to really adjust to the physicality I think that's needed at the top level. But he's put such a good team in place there, and we were talking about the Galway job earlier on, and Johnny Kelly is someone who's been linked with that, and he's coaching with Offaly, and by all accounts he's doing a really good job there, and the players really like him. So like, it's a massive opportunity for them. I wouldn't be saying it's a disaster if they don't win the McDonagh Cup, but what you would want to see is performances. I think is the big thing, that they need to show that they belong at that level and that they're beating these teams regularly. And the big thing for Offaly was they got promotion to Division 1 in the league, which means that they'll be playing at a much higher level. But you look at counties like Westmeath, who you can prepare as well as you can, but if you're coming up against these top sides and taking hammerings, it's very difficult to turn that around come championship. So that's going to be the trick for Offaly to compete well in the league and to not have these sort of draining defeats that sucks the life out of the whole thing. And then you really hope that they can compete for that McDonagh Cup. And Antrim probably the big team there, but I think Offaly would back themselves to take Antrim. So it's an exciting season for them, and there's huge rewards there if they do come out with that. Because the momentum that would build, having 2 titles in a row. So yeah, I think people are positive in Offaly, but there's a lot of work still to do.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how they do in the league. Just a reminder, we are brought to you by Torpy and the Bamboo Stick. If you want to get 10% off, use the promo code OurGame. They may actually be sold out at the moment, but certainly go and have a look. And a reminder to subscribe to the channel. Bottom right-hand corner, just hit that subscribe button on YouTube. If you want to get the audio podcast, go to patreon.com/OurGame. John Kiley has been ratified for a further 2 years with Limerick. Does that mean 2 more years of Limerick dominance, Kevin?
Yeah, like, I look at this Limerick team now, and it sort of reminds me of where Dublin were at the middle of their dominance, maybe around year 2 or year 3, where they're just on another level, and we kind of know tactically what they're going to do. And the thing is, nobody can stop that. They've got to that level where you can talk all about stopping Nicky Quaid's puckouts, or stopping that diagonal ball into the forward line, or pressing them in midfield and not allowing them to create those triangles coming forward. But they're just so good that they're really hard to stop. So I think, like, it was expected that Kiley would stay in place. I mean, why would he go? They have a brilliant age profile. There's no obvious players you would think that will lose to retirement. 1 or 2, the Peter Casey injury maybe will affect them, but I just think the strength of the squad they have there, they have the structures in place, and they're probably looking now at making hay while they can, because they're the top team in the country, and they have everything in place there to continue to win that. So I think the interesting thing, there was no mention of Caroline Currid on that statement, and like, we know she's gone to Munster Rugby, and we're not sure if she's going to stay in place with Limerick. But like, the years that she left them after their first All-Ireland, they didn't win it the following year, and I think any player and coach will tell you in that setup how important she is. So that's probably one to keep on, whether or not she will stay in place. But in terms of the overall management team and squad that they have in place, like, I think they're set up to dominate for another 2 or 3 years, and it's up to the rest of the country to get up to that level and to try and stop them.
I have a comment in here from John Kiley. Again, we're not 100% sure if this is the Limerick manager. I know I'm joking, it's obviously not. Are the Torpy Bamboo good? They are, actually. They add about 20 yards onto my strike. I don't know if people saw before that free taking thing I did with Nisha Waldron, and I was expecting to, like, going between my own 65 and 45 at the sideline. That's a long distance, about 100 yards, Kevin. And I thought I'd be dropping him on the 14, and I actually got 3 out of 5 over the bar. So there's a big sweet spot there, and there's a nice bit of distance on it. So, yeah, but I'll tell you, if I was in a match, I'd probably rise the ball and miss it. That'd probably be the way of it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's the way it goes, yeah.
Yeah, Kiley and Kinnerk are going for 5 in a row. Not 100% sure if they're going to do that. Like, could you see a situation like that happening? They've obviously 2 in a row now, and some people say they should have completed a 4 in a row already. Surely there's got to be some sort of a response from the other counties here, to whether it's matching Limerick physically somewhat, whether you can do that or not is another question, or tactically. Surely some counties got to have an answer for them in the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, and I wonder, looking at Limerick, like, just referencing Dublin again and the 2014 defeat to Donegal, and how that sort of influenced their thinking and their style of play and stuff, and how they went forward over the next few years and dominated. And I just wondered at Kilkenny semi-final when Limerick sort of came into it as big favourites, and they just looked off the pace in the early stages and probably didn't bring the aggression that they've become known for. And I think that was a seminal moment for this group of players, and they probably sat down in that off season and said, like, we cannot let this happen. Like, we've a huge opportunity to become the best team and to really make a legacy of one of the greatest teams of all time. So like since then, over the last couple of seasons, like there hasn't really been a let up from them. They probably had the first half against Tipperary in the championship where they were poor as well, but they look so well oiled. Like everything is in place for them now to continue to dominate. So like I wouldn't be surprised if they do go on to win the 5-0, but you'd have to imagine somewhere along the way that they'll trip up. And I think the fact that Munster is going back to a round robin, it's going to make things a lot more difficult for them. And because you're playing 4 high intensity games, you're going to factor in injuries and different things like that, and suspensions maybe and stuff. And I think the only thing people sort of talk about Limerick, where they're vulnerable, maybe you can get at them a little bit and try and rise them, but that's one small area where maybe they have fallen short a little bit. But I think they're even aware of that now, and they're just such a hard team to stop. Like if you're looking at how to beat them, I think a lot of teams they've done a huge amount of work into them, and you have guys like Liam Cattle who I'm sure are just studying them to death at this stage, but it's very difficult to actually go out and stop that. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, just a note here that Limerick's GAA grounds, like it's been called the LIT Gaelic grounds, there's a 10-year deal, but the LIT Gaelic ground, or sorry, LIT itself, that's changing name on Friday, tomorrow, to the Technological University of the Shannon Midlands Midwest. So the big question is, what were the Gaelic grounds going to be called from here on out? It's the TUS Gaelic grounds. What do you make of that? Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. The LIT did, but maybe in time we'll accept it.
Yeah, there's a few of them county ones that like obviously because of sponsors they have to stick on this bit at the start, but it just doesn't, as you said, roll off the tongue at all. Like that's going to be it's going to be a hard one to remember. Like in Offaly, we're supposed to refer to O'Connor Park as Bud Namona O'Connor Park, but it sort of doesn't roll off the tongue either. So, yeah, I think as LIT have gotten university status now, so they have to change the name, and obviously they can't call themselves University of Limerick because there's already one there. So, yeah, it's going to take a bit of getting used to, I think.
Yeah. Do you know what? Another thing I threw out, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I might as well. What are the cliches, the absolute worst Gaelic games cliches currently in circulation? I love people to get their comments in here, and I'll see what yours is. But a few of them coming in here. Eleanor Burke says pressing up on the kick out. So obviously this is both codes here. He's flying and training, says Declan Clancy. They were very defensive, says Michael McMullen. And he clarifies, the way the game has gone now, teams drop back when they don't have the ball and push forward when they do. Some are just better at it, and some have a link player at 11, an outlet for a kick out. That makes all the difference. Hunger is mentioned. Heel of the hunt. I think Blaman is ribbing me a little bit there because I tend to say it an awful lot. You have to win the middle third, says Dave Kenny. Yeah, I suppose, says Alan. People do say that a lot. And look at, and sure look at. That's a soft free. Yeah, there's Ed Moynihan with look at culture. He's not that type of player. Does that particularly stand out for you, Kevin?
The one, I know you'll agree with this now, but the one that I really get annoyed by is when you hear the sort of rugby jargon coming into GA. You hear guys in interviews talking about work-ons and learnings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then, like, I don't know, I think it's probably something that I do myself, but when you're referring to guys like a quarterback or a point guard, I think that does annoy people as well, because you're like, why are you bringing up a different sport to explain this guy's position when it's completely different what he does? But then I seen someone replying there, Risty Hurd. I actually think that's a great one. Like I love that description of a player. Like there's some that some people might get annoyed by, but I just think they're great. And there's one I was just thinking about cliches in the GA, and there's one that I think is kind of lost in recent years that I always liked was the pen picks in programs, particularly in club programs. I just don't think it happens as much. And I used to always look at the games, and you get to see what a guy's occupation is and what medals he won, and what his favorite movie was, generally Shawshank Redemption. But like I always really enjoyed that one. I thought it was you kind of get to know a guy a little bit more. So maybe that's one that we should bring back.
Yeah, I'd like to see a bit of that. All right, yeah, definitely in Dublin in recent years. I remember a few of the county finals we had to fill them out. But yeah, I agree with you on that point. What else has been said? Showed great heart through the lines. Do you know what's another one coming in now? I saw Jim McGuinness talking about it. Maybe this is the influence of soccer on him. He talked about a defensive low block. And I'm fairly terrified that we're going to be talking about low blocks pretty soon. Nobody knows what it is, of course, but I think we're going to be talking about a low block soon.
Yeah, and there's one actually you often hear when sort of a long-serving player retires, and people go, "Oh, he owes the county nothing." And I just don't get that. Like, what, does someone owe the county something then when he's 20 years old and hasn't done it? You know, it just kind of annoys me as well.
And what about the idea that a manager, you know, he's earned the right to walk away whenever he wants?
Yeah, that's another one. Like, it's kind of, that's what you hear that a lot with Cody now, that he earns the right to choose, and it's kind of hard to argue against that, you know. But then again, you look at someone like Mickey Hart, and that was something that people would have used a lot with him. And then you have the bounce of the first managers coming in, so you can kind of frame these things to sort of to lend to any argument that you're making. Like, there's actually another one. I think Kieran Cunningham's often saying it on Twitter: highly rated S&C coaches. You'll never see an article about a GA coach, an S&C coach coming into a GA setup. It's always highly rated S&C coach.
Yeah, well, he must be terrible if he isn't highly rated, because, I agree with you on that one. Another good one here, actually, Michael Ryan, he goes, putting S after individual players, like, for example, when talking about Limerick and saying, you know, the Keane Lynches, the Declan Hannons, the Sean Finnans, and referring to some aspect of play. But then, you know, we could be talking about, you know, the Tipperaries, the Corks, the Galways of this world. That's another one too.
Yeah, and you find then, you probably see this when you're doing interviews with players or coaches, and they're saying that and you're typing that out, and it just doesn't look right when you're putting it down on paper as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely not. And some awful managerial buzzword slogans: control the controllables, push up, hunger, no fouls. But I actually think a lot of the time managers say this stuff to make it feel in their head that they have a checklist to go through, and we've that much sorted anyway, and we've that much boxed off, and it just allows them to operate with more clarity in their own head. Whether it actually amounts to anything, at times I don't know, but like, the less you leave to chance, I suppose, in their heads, that's probably why they do it.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like, people from the outside sort of don't realise that the managers, if they're saying stuff like this, it's generally for a reason, and sometimes you can overload players with information, whereas if you just have a few key points, stuff like that, control the controllables, like, it means that you're not worrying about refereeing decisions or the weather or anything like that. You're just focusing on what you can do in the game. Like, I know when Conor Myler recently sort of came out that he had sweat and courage written on his wristband, you know, this season, and particularly in the All-Ireland final, when he gave interviews afterwards, and some people were kind of laughing at that, saying, you know, do you really need to look at something written on your wrist to get you going? But I think some players, like, you could be like a visual learner. It might just be that split second in a game, and you're talking about the 1%ers here. You're not really talking about, this isn't something that, if you're an average player, it's going to make all the difference. But if you're looking for the 1% to get you over the line, sometimes stuff like this can work. So I think it is, some players do benefit from it.
Yeah, a lovely one here. People are writing us off. Yeah, people were writing us off all year. Remember when Kilkenny were winning All-Ireland after All-Ireland, and at the end of the year, one of their players would come out and say, look, we were wrote off there all year. And we're like, you know, in the media, you're there going, everyone tipped you to win every single game, and sometimes by 15 points. So I don't know what sort of mental gymnastics you're doing in the dressing room to think that anyone was writing you off. But that is definitely a good one. So is take your points and the goals will come. Massive fan of going for the onion bag every time. Like, I would say about that, right? You know, the way at times you hear, took the sensible option, especially in Gaelic football when you fisted over the bar. If the goal is on, the sensible option is to go for the goal and make sure. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is definitely. I think hand passing over the bar, certainly in football, like, it's come under a lot of criticism. But sometimes it is. If you're running in on the end line, it's the right thing. But I agree with you. Like, nothing sickens me more when you see a guy coming in and there is a goal on and he just hand passes over the bar to get his score on the mark. So it's that's a good one as well.
Yeah, especially if, like, they go on to lose by a point. It doesn't look so sensible now 25 minutes later. You should have taken the goal on. But anyway, we won't focus too much more on that. But there's loads of those great old disastrous cliches been talked about. Keep the comments coming in. We'll talk about the Waterford final coming up this weekend. Ballygunner against Rowan Moore. Ballygunner are going for 8 in a row, whereas Rowan Moore, they haven't been here for 31 years. They're a small club situated between Mount Sion, De La Salle, Ballygunner, just out the road. It's nearly tough to make a case for Rowan Moore to win this. They obviously got through against Dungarvan, but are Ballygunner looking a little bit more vulnerable than they were in the last couple of years, maybe?
I'm not sure. You probably, I suppose, read into their semi-final win, and maybe it's a bit closer than we have seen in recent years. But you just look at the Ballygunner team and the experience they have. Like, they could easily be an inter-county team with the players that they have available there. Like, you know, you obviously up front you have Desi Hutchinson, Peter Hogan, and then before Anthony come back in, which is an interesting one because he's probably missed the best part of 2 inter-county seasons with an injury. So he'll definitely be determined to show, like, that he's good enough to go back into the county squad. And, like, you have then in defence Shane O'Sullivan, Ian Kenny, Barry Coughlin, Stephen O'Keefe in goals. So there's quality all over the pitch. It's kind of hard to look by them. I think, like, is it 42 in games that they're unbeaten now, which is just incredible. You think for a club that you don't even have one off day over all those years, it's an unbelievable record. And like, they probably missed out last season the fact that they didn't have a provincial campaign. And I think you would have a few teams that that really felt, that they would have had a good crack at going and having an extended run into the provincials. So like, it is hard to look by Ballygunner, and like we've seen in recent finals that you sort of had a team coming in against them as underdogs and they just completely put them away. So like, all you can see really here is a Ballygunner victory. I think a Rowan Moore win would be a massive upset.
Yeah, geez, the way Ballygunner took Passage apart, was that last year or the year before? God, they really took them apart. I was reading a John Harrington piece. He was talking with people involved, the chairman of Rowan Moore, but he just the article, he was saying that a large chunk of the Rowan Moore panel are in their late teens and early 20s and are a testament to the work the club have done to revitalise their underage structures, which in turn has transformed them at senior level. So then, talking to the chairman, John Ryan said, it's no secret that there was a time when the club behind the scenes and on the field struggled for a while. We went back down intermediate in the early 2000s and it was terrible for us. We struggled to get back up for a few years. We felt a separation had grown between the juvenile and adult ends of the club, and we just had to close that gap. Thankfully, over the course of the last 10 or 12 years, we've closed that gap, and now every child knows every adult and every adult knows every child. They're all up around the field together, poking around. You have to keep that sense of unity. You can't let a gap develop there or you're in a lot of trouble. Which is absolutely true, and it's probably something that slowly crawls into a club. But then he was talking, think about Gavin O'Brien. He was over some underage team and the entire senior team was in at it, I think, the day after they had beaten Dungarvan in the semi-final. So it definitely sounds like they're going in the right direction there. Even though they're going to be up against it, Peter Quealy's involved. His fourth club, I think, taken to a senior county final in Waterford. So they clearly have the right man in charge. So we'll keep an eye out for that. In Limerick, Na Piarsaigh are going to be the big favourites here, and Doon are already in the semi-finals as Na Piarsaigh are, but we're going to have South Liberties against Kilmallock this weekend and Adair against Patrickswell in the quarter-finals. So Liberties, interested to see, wouldn't it be something else if Anthony Nash with South Liberties was to go along and win a county title in his first year playing in the Limerick Championship?
Yeah, it would be. I remember reporting the story at the time when his transfer went through, and it was a big deal. Like, he obviously has big family connections in South Liberties, and Barry Nash is his cousin as well who plays with him. So it would be great. Like, and I think his as part of his reason for going there, he wanted to get involved in coaching as well and sort of start off his coaching career. So I don't know what he's doing there behind the scenes. I presume he is doing some work on a coaching capacity as well. But yeah, it would be great for them. I think, like, as you said, Na Piarsaigh are probably the big favourites there, and Doon are obviously into the semi-finals as well, and they had a good group stage. And Patrickswell are probably the team people would look at from the outside, and you see Keane Lynch, Aaron Gillan and Dim Burns on that side, and they won it in 2015 or 2018, sorry. So they're another team with an opportunity. Like, Na Piarsaigh are probably out in front, but there's a couple of interesting ones there that could definitely give them a rattle, I would think.
Yeah, Patrickswell definitely a very strong team there, and I kind of, we keep talking about any team with Diarmaid Burns, Keane Lynch and Aaron Gillan in there, you'd think they'd find a way to kick on to the next level. Last year, I think they were 6 points down to Adair, and Adair came back and beat them. It probably is difficult to imagine a situation of Patrickswell not getting through there. And Kilmallock, they've been good in recent years, like Gavin O'Mahony is still there. Graham Mulcahy probably hasn't had his most vintage season, but I'd say just about, like, it would be very interesting, tasty semi-finals, Doon against Kilmallock, and Doon don't have Barry Murphy because he did his cruciate, and I think we'd love to see Patrickswell against Na Piarsaigh again if they do get the job done against Adair. Like, it is a tasty enough county championship, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that semi-final, like, if it was Patrickswell and Na Piarsaigh, I think that'd be nailed on for TV coverage. Like, there'd be huge interest in that outside the county. You have you probably have the greatest spread of players from the All-Ireland winning team between those two clubs. So there's massive inter-county talent on show if that's the semi-final that we do get in place. And then, yeah, Kilmallock, like, I think it was 3-16 to 15 points they lost in Na Piarsaigh in the group stage. So they probably have a bit of improvement to do if they do want to compete in the final. And they were the last team outside of Na Piarsaigh and Patrickswell to win it. It was 2014 when they won it. So I'm sure they'll be determined to get back up there as well. But it's going to be a tough road for them.
Yeah, without question. The Kilkenny Championship is on this weekend. In the league final, Clare are against Bennett's Bridge. Shield final, Mulnavat against James Stephens. Then Championship round 1. So these are teams that can obviously get back into the knockout stages or go into relegation. O'Loughlin's are against the Roar. Listowney are against Dixborough. Shamrocks are against Greg Ballycallan. And Tullaroan against Darren's Own. So it'd be interesting to see how that league final goes. But we won't dwell on it too much just at the moment, because I think there's still, a bit of sorting out to be done this weekend before it gets really tasty the following week. And then the Dublin Championship this weekend. My own Coola could, if things don't go the right way against St. Bridget's this weekend, you never know. Could be, because we've definitely had a bit of trouble with St. Bridget's in the past couple of years. Now, Bridget's, they won on their first day out, beating Thomas Davis, and most people would have expected that. Kilmacud then, after going 2-2 to a point down to St. Bridget's, Kilmacud completely ran away with it against Bridget's. Whereas Coola, losing the first day out to Crokes and losing comprehensively, I have to add, then beat Thomas Davis fairly handily. So there's always an outside chance that Coola's season, after winning 5 and 6, could be done here. And I couldn't help but think that in the county final a couple of years ago, we had Leo Varadkar wearing his St. Bridget's colours on the sideline. I wonder will he be out again for this, although I can't imagine he will.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, that was the one that sort of jumped out to me as well when I was looking at the groups. The day of the land in the groups, like, you can probably talk better on it than me, but I mean, is it a Coola sort of, have they dropped off much from their All-Ireland winning teams, or like, they still have won the last 2 seasons, so they probably still are at the very top, but is it more level playing field, particularly with Ballyboden and Kilmacud there?
Yeah, well, like, Ballyboden only won it a couple of years ago. I think Kilmacud will obviously be, like, raging or like mad to finally get a county title here, having not won one since 2014. They'd won 2 in that. They won 2012 and 2014. But like, for Coola, there's no doubt that there are players kind of that were so crucial to it. Colm Cronin, he's now living in Australia. Paul Schutte, he's retired. He's part of the management team at the moment. So those are 2 lads that, if you were to look back at the All-Ireland winning teams, one of them was crucial in the forwards and another one was crucial in the backs. Like, Paul Schutte didn't train for 4 months and then gave an exhibition in the All-Ireland final, the drawn one against the Piershik 6 days later. Then his hamstring went after about 25 minutes. So like, he was always a crucial part of that. And any of other players that have been injured, like Keane O'Callaghan's only back. Con O'Callaghan obviously was away with the footballers, and he was out for just a little bit there. A couple of other players, like, some players get older too. So it's probably not the foregone conclusion that people would have seen before, but I think Coola will be looking to get through in this game all right. Then just running through some of the other games, I think Lucan Sarsfields against Vincent's, that could be a decent game there. Ballyboden will probably beat Scully Connell pretty well. Fogs and Plunkets could be an interesting one there. Craver against Whitehall, Columkill, and Nafina, who are one of the up-and-coming teams in Dublin for sure, and probably, like, again, beat Coola last year and won by 6 points and were worth every point in that. They're a team coming, and they'll probably beat Ballantyre in that game. I have one comment in here. What do you make of the Tipperary Championship? Not sure how closely you've been able to follow it, Kevin, because I know you're covering all sorts of different championships and obviously in both codes as well. But last weekend, Thurles kept up their 100% record. Bursley knocked out Nina. Did you manage to watch that game on TV last weekend?
No, I didn't actually see it, but no, it was a good win for them, was it? Because they had sort of started slow.
Yeah, like Bursley had lost. Well, sorry, they won the first day out against Roscrea and won well enough. Then the second day out, misfired a little bit against Killerwan. Like, Killerwan are a very good team. They've likes of Niall O'Mara and a few other quality players like that. Seamus Hennessy, who's had a lot of knee injuries over the years, he's still doing very well and putting up big scores for them. But to me, it's between Thurles Sarsfields, Bursley, Killadangan, and probably Killerwan. Now, there are other teams in there. For example, Mullinahone, they topped their group. Upper Church are still in. Lochmore are still in, and we're only a point shy of winning the county title last year. Clonolty won it a few years ago. Killinall are also there. There's 9 teams left in the championship at the moment because of the old the backdoor in through winning your division for Killinall. So I actually think Killadangan will win it this year. 2 in a row would be no mean feat. So I think that's about the height of it. We probably have it all covered there, Kev, do we?
I think so, yeah. I think we got around to everything there.
Yeah, we certainly did. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Just click the button in the bottom right-hand corner there if you're on YouTube. Costs absolutely nothing to do it. It helps the channel grow. And if you want the audio podcast, I'll be throwing it up on Patreon shortly, $5 a month there. So thanks very much to Kevin and to Derrick Lynch earlier. We'll be chatting again soon. Thanks very much, Kevin.
Nice one. Cheers, Shane.
The Hurling Show, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy's Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out on the Torpy website and in the link below, and enter the promo code OurGame to get yourself 10% off.